Hello, this is Scott Gordon, head coach for the Philadelphia Flyers. You're listening to Snow the Goalie.
Welcome into the Snow the Goalie podcast. Russ, we have yet another goalie, former goalie. This will be the third current or former goalie we've had join the show. Flyers coach Scott Gordon. I'm sure he's probably, just like the other guys, not happy with the name of our show, calling it Snow the Goalie. Right, Scott?
Well, it must be a highly intelligent show if you can have all those goalies
on. Well, we really appreciate you coming on. You come on at a great time. I mean, the Flyers are 11-2-1 in their last 14 games, really playing well. I guess the first question I wanted to ask you is, when you look back at earlier in the season, I think about a month ago, a little over a month ago, you guys were dead last in the league, 16 points out of a playoff spot. Since then, 11-2-1. That's I went and looked. It's the best stretch that you've had as a coach at the NHL level. So, did you have a feeling at that time, when it was as low as it could be, that this team could get on a run, like maybe not 11-2-1, but could get on a good enough run to kind of get back into things and play at the level that they're playing at?
I think when we got back from the Washington game, I looked at a lot of different things, but I thought we were really top heavy with our lines. G and Coots were playing together, and they were, doing what they needed to do. But I just felt like there was a kind of a hole in our lineup, and not being able to produce offensively, and the power play wasn't going well. So we really didn't have a whole lot of power play time. And when I started to look at the things that we could do differently, one of them was lines, and then talked about changing some things up on the power play. We followed that game up with Washington with a pretty good game. And there was a point where we had two games in a row where we were down 2-0 early in the game. And one of the games I called a timeout, and the other game I didn't call a timeout. And one of the things that had been going on pretty regularly is every time we got scored on, it seemed like we were getting scored on right away. And we were digging ourselves a hole early in games, and our response wasn't very good. And it was almost like we felt the need to win the game in the next shift. And that was something that... the low point was Washington, where I thought we had played a really good first period. The game was close. It was 2-1, and we gave up a goal, and the next, before it was 3-1 before you blinked an eye. And so, one of the things that I talked to the players about is we've got to identify that the game is not over after we get down by 2. Like, we don't have to win the game. We can't win the game the next shift. We've got to play it out. And our guys have been really consistent with that since that time. And we've seen it a few times where like the other night, we were down 3-1. And, it took us over 40 minutes to come back into that game. But we found a way and did it in regulation. And that's how it's pretty much gone through the stretch.
Yeah, it's been great. One of the things, I know you've talked about at the very beginning, you didn't really have the time because there were so many games in a row. You really didn't have the practice time to really make any changes as far as systematically, right? But what, it does seem that the team has gotten better. Goaltending helps, obviously, with Carter playing as well as he is, but it does seem the team got better defensively in front of him as well. I mean, there's still hockey's a game of mistakes, so there's always going to be mistakes, right? But it just seems that you've cut down on them. Has there been something that you implemented systematically there that has made that a little bit easier, that the guys have really bought into?
Yeah, so we've pecked away at our defensive zone coverage and trying to establish getting away from man-on-man and playing more zone. And the biggest thing is protecting the middle of the ice. And sometimes we'll give up more shots than you'd like to give up, but we were also getting more block shots, which means we're in the right places. The other thing that we did actually it was a week before the All-Star break where we had a couple practices, is we implemented a different neutral zone forecheck. And that was the first opportunity. When I first got the job, if there was one thing I would have liked to have done right from the get-go was that, but I think I had 2 practices in the first couple of weeks.
Right.
And in the middle of that was a Christmas break. So we were also on the road, so there wasn't a whole lot of opportunity to do it. And then when we finally did get an opportunity, right before the All-Star break, we had that week where we had 2 practices. And the first part of working the neutral zone forecheck was the breakout, and then the face-offs, then the dump-outs, and then the changes. And so each phase was implemented with each day of practice. One might have been a pregame skate. And so we went into a game on, I think it was a Tuesday, and we started with the face-off. and then we went into the game against Montreal with everything, but we ended up getting outshot 12-1 in the first period. So there were some wrinkles that we didn't have the benefit of getting more practice time in. That as the game progressed, we've ironed out, and then since then, we've gotten to the point where I think the guys are comfortable with it, and just made it a little bit harder for teams to get through the neutral zone on us.
Does it make it easier in the transition from the AHL? Like, I kind of want to go through the entire process in a sense, because it feels like the idea of coming up from the AHL, something that I'm assuming you didn't expect to have happen in the beginning of the season, was that midway through the year you'd be called upon to lead this team forward. What does that look like from your vantage point? I mean, it felt like it was a really quick decision. It seemed like maybe the organization wasn't necessarily in the frame of mind of like doing the move the day that they did it, but you managed to come in and right the ship. What does this look like for you when you're with Lehigh Valley? You get the phone call that you're now in charge for the remainder of the season. Like, what does that look like for you?
First of all, I never expected it. I was pretty convinced by the media that Joel Quenneville was coming, one. And two, I had no relationship with Chuck Fletcher, so I couldn't even have said that. There was no conversation with anybody about coming up here to coach, and particularly when there's a new GM, you would think that there's probably a good chance that he has somebody that from his previous experience that he would bring in. And as it turned out, I did get the call, but it was literally the first conversation I had was as I was going out for practice on that Monday at 5 to 12, and then after practice we just confirmed everything, and so it was literally an hour before I made the decision is when I found out. So it's not, I honestly, I was thrilled with my job in Lehigh. I love being coaching the American League and getting players to develop and play in the NHL. I have a passion for that, and I was in no rush to get to the NHL. If it happened, great. If it didn't, I was content with what I was doing. And so when you get here, you don't know what to expect, and I got to say it's been better than I anticipated.
Well, it's interesting that you say that you didn't necessarily find yourself in a rush to get back to the NHL level, because from the outside, it would seem like if you've had experience at the NHL level as a head coach, that you'd be chomping at the bit to get back. What was it about coaching at the AHL? You just said about developing players, but like, is that really the thing? Is getting these guys when they come in pretty raw and trying to get them to hone their skills so they can make that jump up? Is that validation for you when you do get a guy to develop that he gets the call up? Like, is that the real draw?
Yeah, it's a completely different animal. So like my experience of being a head coach in the NHL was not the most enjoyable experience. So it wasn't like I was in a rush to get back to that. As it turns out, with me getting the job at the Honors and getting this job, I had the same approach. Just do your job in the American League, whether it was Providence or Lehigh. Don't worry about what might happen. Just worry about the task at hand. And if it's meant to be, it's meant to be. If I never coached in the NHL again, I wasn't going to lose sleep over it. I had my opportunity. I've done a lot of different things as a coach, including being part of the Olympics, World Cup of Hockey, World Championships, and so I've gotten a taste of everything. Been an assistant in the NHL, and for me, the part that's been the most rewarding as a coach has been coaching in the American League. I can't really say that my experience in the NHL, both in Long Island and Toronto, was something that I found rewarding. I didn't get that. When the year's over, you look back on it and you say, wow, this was a great experience. I've had a lot of years coaching the American League where I could say that, and this year has been entirely different than what I went through in Toronto as an assistant and head coach in New York. So, it's actually made me probably more hungry to be a coach in the NHL because it's been such a good experience.
And I was going to just ask that same question, and that was, you could see, just by talking to you and how passionate you are about breaking down what happens in a game or what happens on a specific play, you can almost see that there is that, wow, this is a different situation now. This is a different level for you. And I was going to ask you, and you just said it, but I mean, moving forward, it's almost like, okay, well, if I have to go back to the AHL, I would, but now I kind of like it up here. Maybe this is ultimately where I should be long term.
I mean, time will tell as far as that goes, but at the same time, I went into my first head coaching job having tons of coaching experience, but not NHL experience. And the day-to-day task, at times was overwhelming. I didn't do a very good job of delegating. I underestimated the schedule and how busy it was, and the importance of rest and how to maximize your practices as far as in getting everything that you need to do, but doing it in a manner that allows you to get through it in 30 minutes versus an hour and 15 minutes. And then, to start off with our number one goalie, when I got the job, everyone said, you don't have to worry about goaltending. You've got one of the best goalies in the league. He played 5 games for us my first year, and we had 2 guys that were, up till that point, had not been in the NHL.
Yeah.
And we went the whole season pretty much with them. And then on top of that, we had over 580 man games of injuries. So there was a lot of hurdles that, you're left to do a lot of second guessing that you shouldn't have to do. Not having a true number one goaltender, not having your full lineup for almost the whole season. And as a result, you start micromanaging. You start trying to, try to fix things that probably for other teams is common. It happens, but they're getting, their number one goalie to save them and win them a game. They're getting more of that. Or you've got that depth at center that we had. We didn't have. Every time we played Philadelphia, you had Richards, Carter, and Giroux, and you're throwing out an 18-year-old rookie and John Tavares, who's just learning the league and who's physically not as strong as he's going to be, and the other centers are Josh Bailey, who's at that time I think 19 years old. He's a second-year pro. And so there was a lot of challenges that way that I certainly wasn't prepared for, and having the experience of not only just being a head coach in the NHL, but also going back and being an assistant and seeing how other head coaches do it and how other teams do things. Both were learning experiences that have made the transition coming here easier.
I had forgotten. I covered the Phantoms in 04-05, the year of the lockout, which was arguably the best season the AHL's probably ever had talent-wise. And I forgot that you were the Providence coach at that time, and Providence played the Phantoms in the Eastern Conference Final that year. You guys upset Manchester, I think, first, and then Lowell in the second round. You had a 19-year-old Patrice Bergeron on that team. Obviously, we've seen the kind of player that he's become in the NHL. When you see Sean Couturier playing, do you see that similarity? I mean, he's been compared to him so many times, but we're media people. We don't know hockey like hockey people know it. So we say it and we write it and everybody assumes it's gospel. Do you see the comparison between those two?
For sure. I mean, both are 200-foot players. And this is no knock against Coots, because I think he's a tremendous player, great character. But Patrice Bergeron is at a whole different level above everybody in the entire National Hockey League with the quality of person that he is and what he brings to a team. He's just so selfless. Yeah. And anything, I'll tell you a story. We got knocked out by Boston, and he ends up getting 3 goals and I think an assist in the 5-4 win that they had in overtime. And they did an interview with him after the game, and they're talking to him about his 3 goals and his assist, and they said, how did you do it? And not once did he say I. It was all we, the team. Everything that he said was just a great team effort, and we did what we had to do, and it wasn't easy, and we stuck with it. And then we go through the handshake line in what probably was probably the one of the greatest moments of his career, to be able to basically put your team on your back and take them from a 4-1 potential loss with 10 minutes to go in the game and win it in overtime. As we're going through the handshake line, we just happened to be the last 2 people, and he's saying to me, thank you for all you did for me when I was in Providence. he's not even like, here it is, probably my worst moment.
Yeah.
And then he's like, basically give me a pat on the back that, like took me away from what actually just happened, and like, what a great thing for him to say.
Right.
And that doesn't happen all the time. And so anyway, I kind of ramble on here, but as far as what Patrice does on the ice and what Coots do on the ice, very similar in how they're able to win faceoffs, kill penalties, have an impact on the power play, make the players around them better. Doesn't matter who they play with, and you see tons of that with Coots and Berge.
When you're working with guys at the AHL level, I do wonder this, because you said that practice time was so limited. Guys that you had coached, and then when you were trying to implement wrinkles to your system, did you find it was almost like a flipped shared leadership that you had with guys who had played within your system with the Phantoms, that when you were trying to implement that in practice, like, were some of the concepts that you were putting in something that were so unique to what you had done at the AHL level that guys like Travis Sanheim, other guys that you would coach at that level, almost had a better idea of what your expectations were and took on leadership as young players, almost kind of coaching the vets? Would that be a fair way to say it? Or
Yeah, I'm sure there was instances where where there was tweaks in the penalty kill where oh yeah, I remember we did that. Phil Verone's actually been a guy in the shooting drills, like he knows what's going on because he's done the drills so much that he's often the first guy in line. So right away that makes a difference. At least the drill's going to start off right. It might you might have to stop it and adjust, but I think anytime there's familiarity with the coach and the players, it makes the process easier. They can be in a line and ask a question without having to stop the whole practice. So it's been advantageous.
I do have one question, and this I think is a compliment to you that players have said it so much. In scrums after games, the meticulous detail that you'll break down a guy's game has come up from vets and from younger players. I mean, it's been across the board. I think JVR in at least 3 games, 3 availabilities, has brought up conversation that the two of you had, of you going macro concept of what you were expecting within the system, and then specifically how he fits in. And that seemed like that was the catalyst to get him turned around. But other players have talked about the fact that you've broken down their game in the most minute detail and how helpful that's been. And since I'm the same age as a lot of your players, I know that typically our generation, as Anthony likes to put it, don't like to be criticized or critiqued. I find the fact that they say it in such a positive way is really an anomaly. It speaks to something that you're doing really well. What is it that you hope to get out of breaking plays down like that and breaking down an individual guy's game? Because it doesn't sound like they've experienced it to the level that you've done it.
I thought you were going to ask me to break down your interview.
You can do that too. That would be fun, actually.
No, you know what? I used to bring in guys and I'd show them the video and say, "This is what you got to do." And, all right, get out of here. We're done, right? So I actually I read a book and then I saw a TED Talk and I was just telling somebody about this the other day, and it's his name is Simon Sinek, and he talks about millennials. So for the longest time I coached, and it was always I told them what we were going to do and we just did it, right? And so I watched this video, and he draws this circle, and there's 3 components to it. One is the what, and one is the why. The how, and then the core is the why. And what is what we're going to do. The how is whether it's a drill or video, whatever that we're going to teach it. But the most important part that he talked about was the why. Like, why are we doing this? So when I talk to the players, I try to keep that in mind, especially in the video sessions, because I don't want it to be, I need you to go to this spot right here. I want them to know why they should go to that spot, how it's going to benefit them. And whether it's a defenseman and how he breaks out the puck, whether it's a forward that's going on the rush and is, instead of going to the middle or back post, is going to the strong side post, just trying to explain the advantages for them so that hopefully we have common ground and they can see the value in it like I see the value. I always saw the value in what I taught,
right.
But I finally figured out it's important to let the players, or at least give the players a chance to be able to understand why it should be important to them. They might not ultimately agree, or they might. Sometimes they'll even bring up a point that I didn't even think about, and like I had a conversation with Jake, and he was covering for a defenseman, and he went in on the play, and he was saying to me, he made up a good point. He said, I'm as an offensive guy, I know that if somebody comes at me just being rushed, I might not make as good a play. And I said that's a good point. I said, do the same thing, but instead of going towards their net, go towards our net, and you do what you want to do, and you're covering what we need you to do for the team to be successful, so that we're not giving up an odd man rush.
And so you're talking with them as opposed to at them.
Right.
And that's the big difference with millennials.
Well, considering the job that I'm a teacher, so I feel your pain in a way.
In a way.
Some of this. I mean, there really has been. It's a paradigm shift in how you have to go about educating. So I get where you're at.
So you're a Brockton kid.
Easton.
Easton.
Yeah.
Oh, not Brockton. I'm sorry.
How's
If
that
there
for
was a
research?
hospital in Easton, we wouldn't be having this conversation. The hospital I was
born in Brockton. Gotcha.
I grew up in Easton.
Easton. All right, fair enough. So was BC like an automatic? Was that something like you grew up when you were playing, when you were young, and you're like, oh, I got to go to BC. That's the hockey program I want to be with. Or was there a toss-up? Were you like BU, BC kind of thing? It's definitely staying in New England.
Yeah, I think the whole college thing, like I was fortunate because I grew up in the same town as Jim Craig.
Right.
So he went to BU. I played with his brother, my father, Coach Jim. So he was somebody that I had in front of me. Like when he was playing high school hockey, Oliver Ames was the high school, and they had big rivalry with Randolph and Canton. And Randolph had Rod Langway, and I can't remember, Canton had some pretty good players. But anyway, they played in front of 2,000 fans for high school hockey, and at that time that was huge. And so that was something I wanted to do. Then he ended up going to BU and playing there, and so, I remember to this day my mother telling me that the way you're playing at your age, if you don't smoke, maybe one day you might be able to get a scholarship and go play college hockey. And I literally didn't smoke because that's what my mother told me, and I believed her. So anyway, I started going through the process of going high school, and then schools were starting to show interest in me. I really didn't know where I wanted to go. One of my father's friends was a BC alumni, and he used to talk to me, "Oh, you got to go to BC, you got to go to BC," and I didn't know anything about any of the schools. And then I eventually, you start to get recruited, and I probably heard from, I think there's like maybe 37 Division I schools. I probably heard from 20 of them.
Okay.
And so the things that I looked at were, I thought I wanted to be in Boston. I thought I wanted to play in the Beanpot. I also wanted to go to a school that had that would give me a good education, and then I had an outside school that I looked at. So it came down to I looked at my final four was Notre Dame, UNH, BC, and Harvard, and. So when
the education wasn't the important thing then, right?
Yeah.
It would have been Harvard otherwise.
What are you trying to say?
No, it's a great school.
Come
It's a Jesuit school. I'm a Jesuit guy, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
So anyway, we, when it was all said and done, the Beanpot and playing in Boston, that was probably the final decision.
Yeah.
At that time, it was put to me, if you go to Harvard, you'll be, the alumni is everywhere throughout the United States. If you stay in Boston, if you think you're going to live your life in Boston, then there's a great alumni that stay in Boston, and that would help you career-wise.
Yeah.
At that time, it was just more about wanting to go to BC. After I saw the campus, that was something that it was pretty much black and white.
And while you were there, this is something that Russ didn't know about before today. Zach, we talked to Zach, the PR guy, he didn't know about it before today. You were the first goalie to ever put a water bottle on top of the net so you didn't have to constantly skate over to the bench anytime you needed a drink. Now, I saw it in a book that said hockey first, and it said...
And you have to trust books.
Yeah, you got to trust the book. It said in the book
if it's written, it has to be true.
That it was you and Chris Terreri in a game, playoff game against Providence. And from what we understand now, from just before the show, you say, might not be completely true.
Yeah, so we came off of Christmas break, and we went to play North Dakota, and they had a really good team. And so the first night, we played. I had, I don't know, I think like 45 shots, and there was no TV timeouts there. So the trips to the bench, other than a delay penalty, you weren't going to the bench,
Right.
and the only time you could hydrate was in between periods. So at that time, sports science was not around to tell me that drinking multiple cans of Diet Coke before the game and getting all this caffeine in me probably wasn't going to be advantageous to me being able to get through a game. So my trainer suggested, you know what, you're cramping up. This is after the second period. You might want to take a water bottle and some Gatorade and put it on your net. So I did that, and then the ref comes over and he's like, "You can't do that." I said, "You're not allowed to have a water bottle in your net." I said, "I need to. I'm cramping up." He goes, "Well, you can't have two." And I go, "One's Gatorade and one's water." He's like, "All right, well, okay." So from that point on, I still didn't get the message about the Diet Coke, so I just kept putting the Gatorade. I kept cramping, and that was something that just stayed with me, for the rest of my playing days.
Were you surprised that it kind of took off? That like everybody started doing it after a while?
It didn't even register. I was just doing it out of necessity more than anything else. My son's a goalie at Holy Cross, and he doesn't even have a water bottle in his net. So
wow, okay.
Needless to say, he doesn't drink diet soda, so he doesn't need it as bad as I did.
Yeah, but I mean,
We went back
Yeah,
into the old NHL video games, and I think the earliest that we could find, 2000, there were no water bottles on the back. Was 2004.
Was the first
Looked
time
like the first time that they put it, but the only time the farthest we could track back was 06. Was the first time somebody could actually knock the goalie's water bottle off the net. So
I believe.
so there you go. You got a lasting legacy in video game folklore.
I believe Bob Froese was the first NHL goaltender to do it.
Okay. Was that here? Did he do it here, or did he
Yes,
do it?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. It was right around the time that we did it, but I don't remember the exact date.
Cool. A couple other things because we don't want to keep you all day. You got an opportunity to play in the Olympics, Team USA '92 in Albertville. Even though you guys didn't medal, what was that experience like? And did you have an opportunity to like march in the opening or closing ceremonies? Yeah.
Yeah, we marched right beside George Steinbrenner, and he was with the hockey team, and that part was the show that they put on was tremendous, and then we got to the Final Four. We needed to win one game to win a medal, and we ended up losing the Czechs. We lost to Russia, who that was in the semis. We lost 5-2. It was 2-2 going to the third. And they had 5 power plays, and they had some NHL talent on that team. And then we lost the consolation game. So, but the whole experience was there's been nothing that has compared to it. You don't realize it, like you see the miracle in Jim Craig and all that. So I obviously was a little bit closer to that because of the fact he was from my hometown, and I remember so clearly when we walked out down the hallway and we were about to go on the ice. You're in Albertville, France. You don't know that there's going to be a lot of people from the U.S. there, and it had to be close to, I think it was a 7,000 seat arena. There had to be 6,000 U.S. fans.
Wow.
And so you come out, and I remember clear as day the fans chanting USA, the flags, the painted faces. And that it was just like gave you chills,
Yeah.
And so that whole part of it, and the fact that we had a good run, was just a tremendous experience.
Yeah, and because 1980 was still really fresh in people's minds.
Yeah,
it was only
92,
12 years
yeah.
later, right? That's pretty cool. Have you ever had an opportunity? I mean, we've got the outdoor game coming up next weekend. You ever had an opportunity to play in one or coach in one? I'm outside of shinny hockey.
Yeah, the big house with Toronto and Detroit. Yeah.
Oh, okay, that's right. Yeah. It's a pretty cool experience.
It was so cold, I can't say. It was beyond cool. It was cold.
But let's hope you don't have that kind of weather, that kind of weather here next week. One of the other things that we kind of have been asking guys when we have players come on or whatever, we've asked about your favorite arenas that you've grown up in. Now, we talked on the podcast, the one over at Xfinity Live, we talked a little bit about Johnstown and some fun stuff from there. But any others? I mean, you got to play in like Knoxville and Nashville. I mean, Nashville before it was an NHL city. Atlanta before it was it was an NHL city, but then it wasn't, and then it was. Now it's not again. But like any other places, Halifax, you coached in Quebec and Norfolk. I mean, I've been into the Scope. That's kind of a wacky arena down there. Like any place that really sticks out to you. And It's like, well, this is just based on the fans, maybe the fun stuff with them.
Well, Johnstown, obviously, just because of the history of the movie Slapshot, that was pretty unique. I sat in Reg Dunlop's seat in the locker room. Steve Carlson was my coach, so that gave it a little extra flavor. I remember in Nashville, when I was playing in Nashville, they had there was like not a concourse, but there was where people went either to the lower bowl or the upper bowl. They had this runway that went around, and every time there was a fight, they played Garth Brooks' Friends in Low Places. And the mascot, along with all the kids, would run around as that song was being played, and there was a flag, and I'm pretty sure. But that was that was something different that you don't get to experience. But I growing up in Boston, the old Boston Garden was a pretty neat place to be in. I obviously didn't play there in a home game, but I played a couple college games there, and that was something that was always special. As a kid growing up, one of the things that my father, when I was a kid, when I played as a freshman in high school, we lost we didn't make it to the state tournament. So I asked him if we could go see the state tournament. So we went to the semifinals and the finals. It was in the Boston Garden. It was sold out. And I was like, geez, I would love to do this. There's 13,000 fans. And so my junior year, we played the quarterfinal and the semifinal in the Boston Garden. And that was, like, for me, that was like a highlight that, it's a little more common now. I mean, kids do it
all the time now, right?
Go and play with mini mites or whatever. So that was something that was a real special thing to do as a kid.
Is there ever like a moment as a coach? Is there an arena that you walk into? Obviously, we'll take Wells Fargo Center out of it, Philadelphia Best Fans, the whole thing. Is there an arena that you walk into as a coach, and you just catch yourself in awe for a moment, like where you remove yourself from the task at hand of being a coach? Is there a place that you go to that the atmosphere is just something that you can't really compare it to?
Yeah, there's four places for me. Obviously Boston Garden, just because I'm from there, and you think you walk in, you say, I must know some people here, right? Growing up there, and it's always a pretty good environment. Montreal is, it's just like
it's Mecca.
Yeah, there's that, and it's the enthusiasm of the crowd, music, and then Chicago. And I don't know, there was like 3 instances when I was in Chicago as a visitor, and one was after one of the wars, one was after the Olympics, and I can't remember what the other one was, but I remember being on the bench in one of the games. One was with the Nordiques, one was I was with the Olympic team, and we played a schedule. We played I think we played all the U.S. NHL teams. And so the one after the war with the Nordiques, the war had ended, and just the flags that were in the crowd. Yeah. And Chicago's already a loud place anyway. But the passion when the anthem was being played, that it was even louder than you could imagine. Like, the guy I was standing beside, we just looked at each other and we couldn't even hear each other talk. It was that loud.
Wow.
And then when we were there with the Olympic team playing, it was the same type of atmosphere. So those two games in particular were something that was beyond the norm of your experience of a national anthem. In the other place that I didn't mention is I get pumped up listening to our anthem in our building. Like when I was watching that, when they had I can't think, Kate Smith, and that duet that she does, Lauren Hart does, like that just gives me chills, And it's the same thing when she sings the anthem. That's one of my favorite parts of the game, like the way she sings it, and the way the fans respond to it. Like that gets me pumped up to play.
It is really cool. Last thing I want to ask. What do you do to decompress? Obviously, you sit around during a hockey season. It's very busy to be a coach. You spend a lot of time with video and coaching and thinking about what you're going to do with the team. But like when you get away from the rink, like what are some hobbies that you like to? There's
not a whole lot of time to do much, and here, like you can count. I haven't had too many off days,
right?
So, but believe it or not, the one off day that I had recently, it's just going to a coffee shop, get out of the office, and watch the previous game, and that to me is just relaxing, just to get away from it. get a different vantage point, see some life, people walking around.
Yeah.
I like to go to movies. You know, I enjoy watching. You know.
Are you a binge watcher like Netflix or something like
No,
that?
no. I got away from. I had Netflix, but then Redbox became more current than.
Yeah.
So do you have
Ray Donovan? I gotta go with
Ray
Ray
Donovan?
Ray Donovan.
Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah. Are you like the kind of person who wants to see all the movies that are up for Academy Awards kind of thing?
No,
No.
I'm more partial to actors. You know, certain actors I like to see.
Who do you like?
I like the Bourne movies, De Niro, you know, Jack Nicholson.
So you like The
obviously.
Departed? Is what
Oh,
you're
yeah,
saying?
that's
Yeah.
Departed and the movie with Tom Cruise when he's on the stand there. I can't think of the name of it. Guantanamo Bay.
Oh, A Few Good Men.
A Few Good Men. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great movie.
I usually ask him a question about movies, but I think I already know the answer.
Well,
I
of
think-
course you
I
know
think
the
it's
answer.
just-
This is because you're a
I
moron.
usually ask what the favorite hockey movie is. It's pretty clear. You're not going to pull an audible here and say it's not Slapshot, right?
Well,
Let's make a power ranking because there's a pause here, and now I'm interested.
yeah, I probably. I mean, that's the easy one, but I like Miracle.
Okay.
You know, my
Yeah.
kids, my one son, he listened to that every time they got in the car. This is a true story. So, they had all the lines. You know, they would sit in the car and they would just repeat it before it even came out. And so my son asked a lot of questions about Jim Craig, and I told him he's from my hometown, and I grew up playing with his brother, and my father coached him and all that, like I said. So he was just starting to play goal, and he was going to play his first tournament in Canada. So this was like kind of a big thing. And I got in touch with Jim Craig, and I told him, actually, it was a secretary, I said, can you just get a message to Jim, my childhood friend, and my son's going to play a tournament in Canada. Any chance you could just give him a call and give him a pep talk? And yeah, he's actually in Puerto Rico. I'll reach out to him, but he's got business, and I can't make any promises. So we were in the car on the way to school, and the phone rings, and he goes, "Hey, Scotty, it's Jimmy." I said, "Oh, how you doing?" He's good. He goes, "I got the message, and I'm in Puerto Rico, but I want to give your son the call." And so I said, "Yeah, that'll be awesome. Thanks, Jimmy." So I said, I have the phone. I said, "Jimmy, Eric, Jimmy Craig's on the phone." He's looking at me like disbelief. So he gets on the phone with him, and his eyes are wide open. He's got a big smile on his face, and I don't even know what the conversation was. So he hung up the phone. He's like, "Dad, was that really Jim Craig?" And I said, "Yeah." He goes, "How did he do that? How did he know?" And so I told him. I said, "You had a big tournament," and he said he was going to give you a call, and so he was all pumped up. He I almost felt like he thought somebody else made the call, but that was it was a really nice gesture for him to take the time out of his work schedule in Puerto Rico to give him a call, and it meant a lot.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, Scott, we really appreciate you gave us much more time than we even expected. Really, really appreciate it. Best of luck to you the rest of the year, and we'll be down there asking you all the hard questions after the games and at the press conferences afterwards. But we really do appreciate your time.
All right, we'll talk about water bottles.
Yeah, there you go.